I know for me, like anything having to do with like plants and nature, whether it's like repotting my plants, whether it's watering them in the morning, whether it's going for a hike, going to on an adventure with B, like anything that has to do with that, that is one thing that fills my cup so deeply.
It's like, oh my God, that's what I look like. No. Let me go cake my face and then put all of these filters to cover what I actually look like. You're teaching yourself that you're not good enough by doing that. Welcome to Evolve Ventures, the one place where people like you can dependably go to shift your consciousness to unlimited potential. It is always so fun saying that. I am your host, Bianca Thomas.
And I am your host, Emilia Smith. Welcome back to another episode of Evolve Ventures. We're pumped to have you here. All right, so 117.
We're in a giddy space today.
We're in a giddy space. It's hot where we're recording, and like I was telling Bianca, it kind of feels like we're going through some hot flashes. So we're gonna crank this episode out. So 117. I just want to love myself. This episode, if you are looking for skills and stories to try to help align yourself to a more authentic version that can love on yourself, and to do that is definitely I don't feel like we have a ton of role models in that space. So our goal, our intention for this episode, Bianca and I, is to help to provide a perspective from each one of our experiences, primarily the biggest ones that have shifted our ability and helped us to develop that skill set to be able to love on ourselves. Because like Bianca and I were talking right before we got into this recording, loving yourself is an acquired skill set. B and I really do believe that. And so therefore it is built every single day, just like any other skill. So to start us off, one of the things that I shared with B just a moment ago of that, I think for me in my journey of the opposite of loving myself, when I hated myself and like, I didn't really know it at the time, but looking back, it's really obvious, was when I made really terrible choices that I've had to work through the shame, the guilt, the blame around. And when I kind of look back, being 27 now, looking back at a lot of the different, I would say forks in the road, if you will, you know, whether that was on a weekend or a weekday, whether that was in my safe space or out somewhere else, you know, there a lot of choices that I've made in my past, the ones that I have the most shame around and that I've worked through, really tied into experiences where I wasn't loving on myself. And what I mean by that, the biggest vehicle that helped me to do the opposite of loving on myself was alcohol. And so a lot of the times, you know, from my culture, it was, I guess, socially acceptable to drink. And in a lot of cultures, I know that that's very much a culturally accepted thing to do. And so that was something that was just kind of more normal where I guess I came from. And what I mean by that is like just the small town that I grew up in. And, you know, I had heightened awareness as to the implications of it. You know, we would have high school programs that would be put on where it would put a drunk driver's car on the front lawn so that every time you pulled into high school, you could see the implications of your actions and of your choices, and the ones that didn't serve you, the ones that didn't honor the love that you have for yourself. And though there were warning signs and people that would help to further heighten my awareness of what doesn't look like loving yourself, like for example, if you get into a car and you don't buckle up your seatbelt, right? That's a great indicator that, man, you're increasing your probability of getting into a bad situation, you know? And so what I was telling B before this is that a lot of all of the dots that connected to when I didn't love myself, they also connected very tightly to use of some sort of substance that helped me to like create distance and space away from the person that I wanted to be. And for whatever reason, whether it was a social thing, an emotional coping thing, like there's so many different avenues I could, you know, parse that apart. But ultimately, that was a skill that I developed, which was not loving myself, poisoning myself with a glass of red wine. And looking back, I loved myself a glass of red wine while I was cooking, while I was out with friends, right? I treated myself, quote unquote, and told myself that that was a treat, when in reality, like, you look at the science, it's actually poisoning your body, Em. And we looked up the stats right before this. An average glass of red wine is on the low side, 95 calories, high side, 205. And while
Wow.
when we look at that, we might not necessarily say, okay, that's such a big deal. And I remember even holding a belief, because one of the oldest women that was interviewed, I like picked this story up when I was in college. She was asked, she goes, the interview said, what was your key to living to, like, I think it was like 105. And she said, I had a glass of red wine every single day. And for me, I like clung to that, because I saw that as like my straightway ticket to living to 105, which for me, it's like, okay, anything that I got to do to get to like that state of longevity, like that is self-love, right? And so I really clung to that idea without understanding the implications of that. And so I developed a skill that didn't necessarily serve me, and turns out, did the opposite of this. So for those of you who are out there that are kind of in that spot where I was many years ago, and sometimes we'll reflect on and kind of get into the feels of like, wow, I wish I was more there for myself. I wish that, and you can kind of get into the, I wish someone told me this, right? Instead of taking ownership of all the things that people did tell you and all the things that you ignored, right? For whatever reason. We go back to those moments and we say we could have chosen better. We could have done better, right? And of course, today's that day for you. And for you to love on yourself, I think number one, the skill that really helped me was getting clear on what that meant, which involved shifting my idea of self-love. So whatever your current definition of self-love is and loving yourself, what that looks like, notice that was probably modeled and adapted, if not inherited, by whatever you saw growing up. And we talk about this a lot, but I don't think that we spend too much time zooming into what we inherently adopt. It's like adopting just this little baby puppy that seems innocent and then ends up like 4 years later, like pooping all over your house, right?
4 years later? You're like 4 days later?
Yeah. So I think that's the first thing that I would share with our listeners is, in order to shift your current definition of love and what that looks like and what you can give to yourself, you can't give what you don't have. And so zooming in on that definition, to be able to shift what that definition is and what it means to you, it starts with getting clear on that. What you learned from others, sometimes that looks like unlearning it for yourself.
I think a big part of that too is making sure that whatever that blueprint is for you, making sure that it's not based on the opinions of others. Making sure that your definition of beauty, for example, your definition of what a good body is supposed to look like, your definition of what a happy life in general is supposed to look like. It's not based on what someone else is telling you and you following through on it just because you want love. You want love from that person because you're not giving it to yourself. I think another big component of that with the alcohol, I think so many people just don't feel love. Yeah. And they don't feel self-love, so they're masking. They're masking with alcohol. They're masking with social media. They're masking with, I don't know, so many different things. But one of the biggest toxic things that I think people are doing, and this is my number one, is the use of filters on social media.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you how many people. Actually, let me rephrase that. I don't know that many people who don't use filters. It's actually more common now for us to scroll and see people using filters than to not. How can you learn to love yourself when you feel like you can't post a picture without using a filter to cover your face, to cover what you actually look like, to cover whatever? You're trying to cover something. You're trying to change the way that you look. How can you learn to love yourself that way? I took on a personal challenge a few years ago. I genuinely, I was the same. I could not take a picture without using a filter. I could not let people take pictures of me because I was like, I don't want anyone seeing me. And that was the point where I was the most shameful of myself, where I didn't love myself at all. So I can't let people see me. I look terrible. So what would I do? I used a filter. So I made a promise to myself that I will not use filters anymore. I just won't do it. Even the funny animal ones and whatever, right? Because it still like contours your face to a certain degree.
Yeah, which is so weird.
It's so odd. But so I made that decision, and the impact it has had on my mental health and on the way that I see myself really has been amazing, because I can take a picture, I can see myself in a picture and not cringe. It's like, oh my God, that's what I look like? No. Let me go cake my face and then put all of these filters to cover what I actually look like. You're teaching yourself that you're not good enough by doing that.
So true.
So, and it's hard. I mean, I've been around people who like, they'll sit on their camera for 30 minutes using different filters trying to find the right one so they can take a picture and post it. And it's like, God, I wish you didn't have to do that, because the way that you're going to feel about yourself when you stop needing that, and when you can learn to love your features, like my nose, for example, I hate my nose. I talk about it. I used to talk about it all the time. It is what it is, whatever. But I couldn't take pictures with my nose showing. Like I would make sure that my face was angled a very specific way. And now it's like I've forced myself to be okay with it. And I got the nose ring, which makes me feel better about it, right? So I'm not using things to completely alter my face. I'm learning to love it for the way that it is. And it has, like I said, it has improved my mental health and the way that I see myself and the way that I love myself so much.
I've been talking a lot recently with my clients around cup fillers, and it's interesting because right now it's always really cool, and I coach a lot of women and some men, and it's always so cool because the femininity of both genders kind of sync up in like a circadian rhythm like pattern. And B, I know you probably know this because you probably have similar experiences. So like when one client needs cup filler work or boundary work, then it's ironic because a similar like quest is where the other client is. And so it's really cool because you get to cross pollinate and help them develop their own skill sets that really serve them. And recently I was on the call with one of my clients, and it was just like such an amazing experience for me because I got to authentically communicate something that I love so deeply about myself and have learned to really and organically love and respect and honor about myself, which fills my cup up so much that in hindsight and looking back, it was never something that I really owned up to. I didn't really identify that and say, okay, that one thing that is going to fill my cup. So for those of you who aren't, who are listening and aren't necessarily familiar with cup fillers, it's like doing something that really makes you feel whole, that makes you feel centered, fulfilled, aligned. Bianca, one of her cup fillers for sure, she shared this on previous podcasts, is going for long drives. I know that about her. I know that what that does for her, especially around nature, especially if it involves a sunrise or a sunset, especially if it has water around it. I know that as her best friend and as her business partner, and she's cheesing right now if you were to see us.
I love that you know that. I really do.
And Chinese food is another one, but that's getting into love languages.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so she and I bond over that, right? But one of the biggest cup fillers for me, that really fills me up, it energizes me, it gets me really excited. And to be honest, it's a vessel and a habit that I've done to develop a skill to love myself, which is just honoring my truth. And my truth was this. I love nature so much. I was actually giggling about it with Alan, like going on a whole thing. Like, I just love nature. She's like the best. It's so cute. But I was talking with this coaching client and it was just like, I know for me, like anything having to do with like plants and nature, whether it's like repotting my plants, whether it's watering them in the morning, whether it's going for a hike, going on an adventure with B, like anything that has to do with that, that is one thing that fills my cup so deeply. And what I've done is I've made sure and honored that which fills me up, which helps me to love myself even more. And when I was able to share that with this client, it almost in a way kind of gave her permission to explore like, well, what actually makes me love myself more? What is it about me that I love doing that fills me up? And why am I not doing more of that? Why don't I have that as a habit in my life? And it got her to contemplate, which I really am so grateful, and hopefully it'll change her life forever. But the thing is, to this point of self-love being a skill and wanting to love yourself is great, but action is a whole different thing. And doing that repetitively, consistently, that will put you in the arena to set up opportunities for you to love on yourself more. I didn't realize how much I love plants and how much I love how they grow and how much I love, their different watering styles and how much I love like how they bend into the light and how extraordinary just being a plant mom is. And it's like, I never really knew that about myself because I never really learned to love that about myself. So, to everyone out there that is listening and is joining us on this evolutionary journey, part of that is learning what specifically you want to love about yourself and honoring that truth, regardless of what other people think. Me at like 16 years old, when like whatever I thought was cool, no way in hell would I have said like, I can't wait to like get my plants. Like, I can't wait to go to the store and get my plants. And like, I can't wait to wake up to water up my plants. Like, no way. But why? It's because I didn't admit that about myself back then. I didn't honor that back then. And I certainly didn't surround myself with people who could celebrate me for that. So the lesson here for each one of you, hopefully, and this is the last thing I'll say before final takeaways, is shifting and evolving out of not loving yourself into loving yourself. The want is 1000% there. It's the doing and the honoring yourself, which is a whole nother journey. And we hope that through these episodes, through, our virtual events that we do, through Bianca and I's vulnerability in these stories, we hope that at least gives you the permission slip to love, to learn what you love about yourself. And it is truly a journey. But the destination does matter. And if you want to love yourself, put yourself in the arena that can honor that.
The last point, wow. The last point that I'll make, it ties into the not listening to what other people have to say about what you're supposed to look like. So I posted a reel on my page the other day, and it got a ton of views. I don't understand Instagram's algorithm. One day I'll post something and literally it gets like 1 view, and then I'll post another video and it gets like 30,000. So I don't understand the algorithm. But I posted a video, it blew up, and I was so excited about it because I felt really good about the video. I liked how I looked in the video. I liked how I sounded. I just liked how I came across. And I open Instagram up later and I pull the video up because I just wanted to see the metrics on it. And there was a bunch of comments on there from people saying, I wish I could pay attention to what she was listening to but her hideous nose ring is so distracting. She looks like a bull.
Oh.
And just hateful comments like that.
Yeah.
And I felt really hurt. You know, I was like, I wish, like, I'm putting content out there to try to help people and to try to, like, improve people's lives. And there's people out there who all they want to do is just bash you.
Yeah.
And the point of that story isn't to be like, oh, poor B, right? Like, people are going to say what they're going to say, but that's the point. No matter what, there's always going to be someone who doesn't like how you look, that has an opinion about what you should look like, what you shouldn't look like, how you should be, how you shouldn't be, what you should do and not do. But the most important opinion is your own. How do you feel about you? How do you feel about what you look like? How do you feel about how you feel in your body? Because if you keep trying to live your life based on what other people's opinions are, I played that game. It's a losing game. Yeah. You're never going to feel good enough. But when you can decide, you know what? People are going to have their opinion, but I'm going to learn to love me. It takes away all of those opinions. Those comments bothered me for a couple of minutes, and I was like, all right, whatever. I like my nose ring. And I posted a picture afterwards. I just felt good about it. People are always going to have an opinion. People are always going to tell you what you should and shouldn't do. It doesn't mean you have to listen.
There's so many layers to this, and I love every layer. And I hope that our listeners can really learn to love the layers too. Because again, it's such a journey, meaning that it's a day in, day out commitment. It's a day in, day out choice. Like you just said, B, like, you can it's the door that you open is what brings in that energy. And after a couple minutes, you close that door and you said, no longer, because I love this part of me. I love this about me. And I'm not interested in, the hateful things. So good on ya.
Good on ya. What's your final takeaway?
I think
suggestion. Apart from good on ya.
To that extent, when you feel helpless or hopeless in the ability to love yourself, I want to encourage you to reach out for help. Get around people who have been further along in this than you. And for me, it was like books and women that had podcasts like we do. And it was I call them sages in my life, other women who had the wisdom that I learned from and I took their guidance on. And I am so grateful for that humility back then, because ultimately it was always my decision, but I needed to get feedback from other people. And I think that that's the only thing that I would share as a final takeaway is there's help all around you. You just got to be open to it.
What's your episode suggestion?
My episode suggestion is 56, how to transform your inner outcast feeling so that you can really pull that right on out of you. How about you?
Pull it right on out of you.
Right on out of you.
My final takeaway is that it's what we started off with. Learning how to love yourself or feeling loving towards yourself, it's not something you're just going to wake up and feel. It's a skill. It's something that you practice every single day, and you can do it. And I know you can do it because I've been able to. I was actually on the call with my coach this morning. Or not this morning, it was a couple hours ago. And I told him, I was like, this is the first time in my life I've ever actually felt confident in myself. Like, I'm really starting to love myself. And it's because of all these things that I'm doing every single day. Like, I'm being incredibly conscious about what I do and don't do, what I say and don't say, but not based on what someone else is telling me, but what feels right for me. So it's a skill, and it can be learned, and you can do it. And that ties into my episode suggestion, number 23, how to set boundaries.
Oh, so good.
Because if you're not setting boundaries around yourself and protecting yourself and letting the people in your life know what you're okay and not okay with, you will never be able to love yourself. And setting boundaries with yourself about what you'll tolerate, not tolerate, and what you'll tolerate with what you say to yourself too.
Big green flag on that. The only thing that I want to say before we jump out of here, we have shifted Out of the Mud live virtual events to the last Wednesday of every single month at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So the link will always be in the show notes for you to register. It's a private free event hosted on Zoom, so completely virtual. You can join without your camera, you can join without your mic, you can just come in and sit in and listen and get around growth-oriented humans that want to evolve and are going through the similar struggles that you are. So it's been really helpful for a lot of our community members to feel a sense of community and to know that they're not alone. So we hope that if you're interested in something like that, even just pop in. It will be absolutely incredible. This month we are talking about
how to finally feel good in your skin. An important thing of that too is this is not just directed towards women. This is not going to be an event that only women can relate to. We also are implementing the male perspective because we know how important this is to everybody, not just for women. So this is for everybody, and we really hope to see all of you there.
Last Evolve Ventures plug here. We have IG Lives every Friday at 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. So you might have heard that it's a different time, but facts are facts. And if you're ever wanting to keep up with what we got going on, we have some incredible content, value-driven content being pumped out by our media team that can really be a great save away for you to leverage in your daily lives. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining us on the journey, and thank you for allowing us to be a part of yours. We have so much gratitude to you and are excited for the next episode.
We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.